Most people don't realize how much of their personal information is being bought and sold every day. Data brokers are making millions pulling details about you from public records and the internet, then packaging and selling it, usually without your consent. That's how your information lands in the hands of scammers, spammers, even stalkers. It's why you get endless robocalls and why ads seem to follow you everywhere. That's where Aura comes in. Aura actively removes your data from broker sites and keeps it off. They also instantly alert you if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura goes beyond data protection. With one app, you get a VPN, antivirus, password manager, spam call protection, dark web monitoring, and even up to $5 million in identity theft insurance, all backed by 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other companies might just sell credit monitoring or just a VPN. Aura gives you all of it, together at the same price competitors charge for just one service. Start your free trial today at aura.com/hidden. Protect yourself now at aura.com/hidden.
Coming up on the Threat Status Podcast, we have exclusive interviews with White House Office of Management and Budget Director Russell Vought and Department of the Navy CTO Justin Fanelli from the Threat Status IndoPac 2026 event this week in Washington, focused on how the U.S. can rebuild its shipbuilding capacity, how America can dominate in autonomous systems, and the importance of command and control in any potential clash with China. Don't forget to go to WashingtonTimes.com and sign up for the daily Threat Status newsletter. Hello and welcome to the Threat Status Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Wolfgang, national security correspondent at the Washington Times. Thanks for being here with us this week. As always, a little bit of a different episode for you this time around because we are coming off of our major IndoPac 2026 event at the U.S. Navy Memorial in Washington this week. Myself, Guy Taylor, John Seward, Bill Gertz, Vaughn Cockayne, Jason Sickles, all the other members of the Threat Status team and the Washington Times were involved in putting on this high-level and very successful forum that focused on shipbuilding, autonomy, and command and control. Republican Senators Deb Fischer and Todd Young spoke at the event, as did Rebecca Gassler, the Department of the Navy's Portfolio Acquisition Executive for Robotic and Autonomous Systems, Captain Randy Cruz, Commanding Officer of the Naval Research Laboratory, Republican Congressman Pat Harrigan, along with leaders from across the defense industry. And of course, Threat Status was thrilled to partner with AIR, Hanwha Defense USA, Leonardo DRS, L3 Harris Technologies, Lockheed Martin, and our data partner Obvient for this event. So look, I want to get right to it. First, you're going to hear some of Guy Taylor's fireside chat with Russell Vought, the director of OMB at the White House. And then you'll hear my fireside chat with Justin Fanelli, the chief technology officer of the Department of the Navy. Great conversations here about what the Trump administration is doing to accelerate shipbuilding, how the U.S. can keep its maritime technology edge over China, what the commercial first approach to technology means as far as the Navy is concerned, and a lot more. This is just a taste, of course. You can go to WashingtonTimes.com and hear more from this event. But for now, let's get to the conversation between Guy Taylor and Russell Vought.
So you're in an incredibly important role. You're right at the intersection of how U.S. taxpayer money actually gets implemented. And my assessment, watching from this side as a journalist, from this side of the mirror, as they would say, my assessment is you probably know this role better than anybody who's had it at this point, given your experience and your second time go around at it. And we're at this precipice now. This is also incredibly important because we're at this precipice of what could be a $1.5 trillion defense budget. I think national security insiders know what OMB does. They know what you do. But for folks who maybe aren't so clear, How do you see the role as it regards to the Department of War and the U.S. Navy from really the inside where you are?
Sure. I mean, from OMB perspective, unrelated to what we added to it this year, OMB is the only place that you're going to have a government-wide view of the entirety of resources and regulations. So it's not just Navy, it's Coast Guard. And so if you're trying to think through, is this the right place to make this resource spend at this shipyard versus another one that the Coast Guard might be doing, it's really important to have that view. We also have the ability to bulldoze bureaucracy and to bring a lot of force of the White House, of the President, in pursuit of a particular policy objective. And so that's really what OMB typically well used is like. What's different this time is that the President and the administration put the shipbuilding office within OMB almost as if it's a standalone management division. And that is different. It's very important. And I view it as kind of that seal of importance to the country that we're always going to have a government-wide emphasis on maritime dominance, on shipbuilding, on using our resources, all of government, to maintain adequate shipbuilding in this country, both commercial and military. And so we're building that shipbuilding office up. And it means that we're a little bit more involved on the shipbuilding side than you would say in all the other things that DOW funds or the federal government's involved in.
I noticed that you made an appearance at the Reagan Defense Forum at the beautiful Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in California back in December. And there you made headlines. You issued a pretty sobering warning that China's shipbuilding capacity has just significantly outpaced that of the United States. That was months ago. What are your latest thoughts on that today? Has the administration done what needs to be done?
I think we are doing it. I am very impressed with our team. We work well together. I was on the road with the Secretary of Navy last week, hitting most of the shipyards in the country. It's my second time. I visited most of them in 2020. We have a great head in both Pete Hegseth and Steve Feinberg. Everyone is going at this with aggressiveness to say that we don't have a lot of time. We're way behind. We have backlogs everywhere in our military classes. And what China is proving is in South Korea and Japan and others that they can build ships fast and we can't. And we have to fix that. And our scarcest resource is time. And we don't want to be in a situation where we've left office however long God has given us in these roles, and we haven't fixed that and put it on a durable direction to where both we've rebuilt the commercial side and the Navy and the Coast Guard can produce ships. Coast Guard, we've basically recapitalized the whole fleet. I mean, everyone talks about the one big beautiful bill. They never talk about, and I understand it, it's largely a tax cut bill. We had major savers in there. We also did things like entirely recapitalize the Coast Guard fleet. So we're seeing investments everywhere, and we've got a lot of things that we're very excited about that are part of the $1.5 trillion defense bill that I think if go through, you will see another set of big swings that will be enduring.
How robustly or not should the U.S. be with regard to involving major foreign security allies, Japan, South Korea, Australia, others, in this push to expand building capabilities?
They should be involved, and this is a major debate that I think you all are starting to be aware of, and I do think I need to explain it a little bit. We want foreign ships, but those are all foreign investment in future domestic shipyards. So the way it properly looks is the deal that we did this last year with icebreakers in Finland, where we had two separate deals for a total of 11 icebreakers. In both of those cases, two separate companies, Rama and Bollinger and Davies, were making investments, one in Tampa and one in Galveston, Texas. In the case of Davies, they put $1 billion into a shipyard, Gulf Copper, to bring that up so that it can compete for more types of ships long term. But in the meantime, it can do the follow-on icebreakers. So each will do 2 in Finland, and then they will come and do the remaining 7 here in this country. So when we talk about foreign ships, we're not just saying, hey, we're going to buy off the shelf and be importers of ship. We are saying that these are direct foreign investments that are tied to the trade deals. You have $150 billion of Make American Shipbuilding Great Again in the South Korean deal. That would be permanent investments here that would give us more competition. Because as they're doing icebreakers, next they do that well, they can then bid on additional ships. We've put auxiliary ships in the budget, and so we want surface combatants to be a part of the push towards direct foreign investment. We're going to be studying it, but it's very important, and we need the competitive juices flowing. These entities, these companies want to be a part of shipbuilding here, and honestly, we need the competition and the capacity. And if we have multiple companies competing for a particular class of ship or new auxiliaries that we haven't done before, that's a good thing.
I want to get to 2 more things at least. Nobody's waving at me yet about time. I want to pivot a little bit and talk about, and I'm curious about how often this comes up in your discussions and how into this debate you are, about prioritizing between new construction and maintenance. Because we've got a situation where the Navy is now embracing a hedge strategy. Its most dominant platforms are stretched. The Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier group a couple of years ago returned from its longest deployment overseas ever. How does OMB balance the push for new ships, Golden Fleet ships, as opposed to focusing on repair and needed repairs?
I'll give you a non-OMB answer and say both. Just give on new ship construction versus innovation and new technology. We need bigger ships. The ships, like you take the destroyer, they're just too jam-packed and too heavy, and they're fine, but like we need a bigger ship, and ultimately that will help us build ships faster. Because right now when you have a compressed ship, you're having to make all sorts of tight corners that is harder and takes longer to manufacture. I saw some of that last week. So I think giving us more space, bigger ships at times will help on both fronts, and you can pack it with additional features. But from a maintenance standpoint, we're pushing hard for an additional public shipyard. If we're going to spend $1.5 trillion or have the types of direct foreign investment that's coming in, we want to make sure that we have the ability to have enough public shipyards to do maintenance. In part because you're going to have contracts with companies that are doing maintenance, and that's all fine and will continue. But the extent to which someone waking up in the morning and it's just saying, my main mission in life is to repair Navy ships and to do it at scale is something that is absolutely vital. We had to basically retire one of the Los Angeles class ships recently just because it hadn't been maintained in such a long time. And we all agreed on that decision. That wasn't just one where those who care less about the fleet size said this is, we're going to save O&M costs on it. We all agreed at that point it needed to occur, but that had come after 10, 15 years of bad management, and we need to fix that.
We're in a sense talking about the push for a Golden Fleet. What are the challenges as you see them? I guess what I want to ask is almost like what gets in the way of providing funding on time? There's a lot of juggling you've got to do. Does it have to do with money not being there, or does it have to do with discretion? And regardless of that, what do you see the challenges as going forward?
So when I left office in 2020, my view that it was mainly a bipartisan demand signal that needed to be sent. So at the time you saw Robert and O'Brien put out a long-term shipbuilding plan that we could judge the Biden administration and see how well they were doing. I don't believe that's the issue coming back into government when we see these backlogs. We have to be able to produce ships faster with more capacity, more competition, and not have it so that it takes more than 4 years to have a ship entering the water. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that we're trying to tackle right now. Is I think the resources will be there. We will make sure the resources will be there. But a resource today that ultimately is not spent for 6 to 7 years is trading on something that we could be spending today, right? And so I understand long lead procurement is necessary for the supply base, and we're seeing that up close and personal. But we have to get the backlog reduced significantly and have more players competing for these programs.
So those are just some really good and exclusive insights from really one of the key figures inside the Trump administration. Some might say even the most pivotal figure inside the Trump administration, from the broad perspective of invigorating U.S. shipbuilding and all of these maritime initiatives from the Golden Fleet and others that the administration is undertaking right now for the United States. So look, you can go to WashingtonTimes.com to hear more from this event. In addition to all of the great partners I mentioned earlier, I should also mention Purdue University was our education partner for the event. So just a real fantastic coming together across the board, and everybody who has essentially anything to do with U.S. maritime and naval power, technology, shipbuilding, command and control, autonomy, and a lot more. And speaking of the tech side of this, I was thrilled to sit down with Justin Fanelli, the Chief Technology Officer of the Department of the Navy, for a fireside chat that dove pretty deep, I think, into what the U.S. needs to do to keep its tech edge over China and a lot of other really key topics. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Navy CTO Justin Fanelli. Good morning, everyone. Justin Fanelli, thank you so much for being here with us today. This great venue, we've got a great program ahead of us. I want to jump right into this with kind of a blunt, sort of overarching question to set the scene for everybody here. We're going to hear a lot today about advantages China has in raw numbers of ships, in production capacity, and those physical things. But I'm curious, from your position as Chief Technology Officer of the Navy, are you worried that America could be losing its advantage on the tech side as well? And what are you all doing to make sure that doesn't happen?
Okay, good morning. Great to be with you, teammates, in an awesome venue with a theme that we've been handed to us by the former CNO, Speed. So very happy to stay on the through line there, and I think that relates to this question a lot. So number one, ships are technology. The shipbuilding process, the infusion there is something that we are paying a lot more attention to than we had in the past. How this lays out for me, I want to talk to you about within the frame of the clocks, how I'm thinking about the world right now. We have existing capabilities. Those are Horizon 1. If you think about any organization, they spend an outsized amount of time on the current production. What does the maintenance look like? How much time are we spending on this? The next Navy, Horizon 2, what are we shooting through? What are the pilots that we have? What are we doing to disrupt ourselves in the way of technology? And then Horizon 3, the Navy after next, as we call it, what are the things that are happening coming down the line? One of the big differences that's happening right now is a lot of that used to happen in the building or down the street at DARPA. We're opening the door, we have opened the door to the private sector to say, help us reimagine. Help us figure out what is available for us to grab and run with. So I think there was a while there where we were operating under the assumption that we controlled all of the clocks. Yeah. And realistically, you control what is available to you, and you inherit a lot of that. And so we have gotten a lot more proactive. The answer to your question in my mind is it was about time for us to start thinking about the way that we invested in tech differently. Right. You heard from the current CNO, the idea of differentiated value and quantifying these things is probably music to all of your ears, right? You're going to spend on what you needed for the last war as opposed to the next one unless you're able to divest things. The two hardest things in government, especially as it relates to technology, is number one, prioritization, because everything is a number one priority in government.
Right.
And then divesting. Can you make trades between one technology area, space, and another technology area, maritime domain awareness? People in the past have said you couldn't possibly trade that. That's not how budgets work. And so based on what's available in the private sector, we're able to incorporate that into what we adopt faster.
So let's drill into that a little more, because you've been a champion, of course, for the Innovation Adoption Kit, which is this framework for evaluating, implementing, and scaling innovative technologies across the Department of the Navy. So doing it quickly, but doing it only after you've evaluated it and know that it's going to do what you want it to do. Can you kind of detail how this is actually changing things inside the Department of the Navy? And blunt question again, have you run into any kind of institutional resistance with this Innovation Adoption Kit?
Of course. Who's ever seen the DoD 5000 acquisition, Rube Goldberg? Okay, if you haven't, spend 30 seconds being frustrated with us. It is a mess. And so it is a great feat to get anything fielded, whether it's the right thing or not, historically. And so we said we need this to be less friction, more impact. And so we just converted it to a funnel. And so the Innovation Adoption Kit is to say, hey, are we evaluating things in horizons? B, are we evaluating based on the impact that they're bringing? And so was there resistance? There are a couple C stories here. One, we said, hey, we're going to start looking at these systems afloat and saying, is it worth its return on investment? About 4 years ago, we had a couple political appointees that said, we don't like the use of the word investment in government. I said, I just have an adverse reaction to that, right? So I think we have changed that. We are now thinking about dollars and cents. And what this does, that I think is incredibly important for industry, is it now invites folks to come in and say, here's how you're doing this right now. We have a better way. This opens the door to a hedge strategy that's not just defined by government spec requirements or technologies. It's saying if you can quantitatively improve on the status quo, then we want that. And so it really reshapes the conversation. The conversation literally used to be, hey, we want a new afloat hardware. We are going to put out a request for proposal, and then 4 years later, we'll start fielding on the first ship. The way that's working right now is we are saying, hey, what is available? We did a 1 month evaluation, and we started rolling something on a ship. In this particular case, someone tried to roll it off of the ship. We got waivers the next day, rolled back on the ship. The sailors loved it. The chief systems officer called his friends, and then that was on 13 ships in 3 months. Yeah. So what does this look like? It looks like, can we scale faster? And can we show that what we're doing now is more effective than what we were doing before?
I want to ask you about the administration's commercial first strategy, the idea of using commercial technology in a military defense security context. Do you fear that strategy could eventually kind of run out of road, so to speak? Are we nearing a point where, with all this venture capital money and private investment, these startup companies, is it pushing them towards the defense space? In other words, do these companies, does commercial first stop truly being commercial first at some point?
So, is widening the funnel hurting us? Certainly not yet. Yeah. As the pendulum needed to swing, it needed to swing a lot, right? Yeah. So we had too few suppliers, and really, if we don't have a whole of nation with many sectors contributing to this, we're not in the spot that we need to be in. And so I think from a talent perspective, from folks contributing to the problem, folks interested in the problem, that's in a much better place. Is it running out of runway? I mean, that's a problem I'd love to see. I haven't seen that yet, frankly. The reality of the situation is our acquisition folks and our technical folks are used to building when they could buy. What that ends up looking like is solving solved problems. And it's the most expensive, slowest way to do this. And so it is an awesome feat to create a piece of hardware that you can roll around. But we spent $1 million a few years ago creating what Amazon calls a snowball, and it cost us $1 million, and you can rent one for $50K a year from Amazon. The idea of standing on the shoulders of giants as a best practice so that you'd never have to have that conversation, let alone across 450 program offices, that's the mission. And so what we're now seeing is stars, I think you'll hear from Rebecca Gassler, that these portfolio acquisition executives have permission to move as fast as useful.
Okay.
And so have her actually tell the story about how quickly we bought boats, how quickly we are allowed to take receipt of things that used to take months and years.
Okay. One last question. We have about 2 minutes left here, but I have to ask you about this. Back in March, Admiral Caudle said, quote, "There should be no reason why I can't place a modular container on the back of our ships and carry an array of capabilities to any region in the world," unquote. Is there a limit to how much of this you can do? What is the limit what you can do with existing ships, modular capabilities, and at what point do you need an entirely new ship?
Okay, so from a modular perspective, I would love for us to push the boundaries on that, right? So like, are we at the limit? Are we at the limit of how much AI is making us more effective? I think we're not close. And so the idea of if we have all of the components and they are easier, 1961 is around the time that containers went viral, right? So Army invented containers in 1956. 61, we're still unloading things off of ships, putting them into the world. What doesn't go into a container? 90% of commerce travels by container. So can we do that with EW payloads and kinetic payloads? And like the idea of institutionally reducing integration is just a net good idea. If we run up the limits against that, and we do, I mean, there are places where you just can't fit it in a box. How much directed energy power would you want to put into a box? There's a natural limit, but this is American business and American scientists figuring out like creativity through constraints. And so a couple seasons of that to really refine what we're doing and stay as kind of world class as we've become in other areas, I think we're ready for that smoke.
Okay, great. Justin Fanelli, thank you so much. And it's time now for Threat of the Week, our weekly segment here on the show where we each identify a threat, whether it's here at home domestically or in some corner of the world that we think is impacting U.S. national security right now, this week, as you all listen to the show. And my Threat of the Week builds off of something that Congressman Harrigan said at IndoPac 2026. The future of conflict is going to be defined by nations that have autonomous capabilities, aerial drones, sea drones, undersea drones, and those that don't. And my threat is that the U.S. doesn't actually meet its lofty production goals, the scaling, the defense industrial base actually physically building these things at the levels we need to be the global leader in autonomous systems for the rest of this decade and beyond. Now, on the budget side, the numbers are there. A couple of quick data points for context, just as an example. The Trump administration's 2027 budget request includes major funding increases for aerial and ground drones. The largest percentage increases would go to medium unmanned surface vessels and other unmanned systems such as the Navy's torpedo tube-launched and recovered remotely operated vehicles. Those two initiatives would see funding increases of 584% and 183% respectively. That's according to data provided to Threat Status from Obviant. Now, look, so across the board, there are figures not quite that high, but close to it in some cases that demonstrate just how big of a financial commitment the administration wants to make here. So the money seems to be there, but is the production capacity? We got into that question on my panel discussion with Congressman Harrigan, Rebecca Gassler, J.R. Geer from L3 Harris, and Brian Clark from the Hudson Institute. You can watch that full panel at WashingtonTimes.com. But my threat of the week is that, look, there are real questions about whether production capacity can match the really, ambitious goals laid out in the budget, at least in the short term. And if it can't, that's potentially a big problem for the United States moving forward. And with that, a huge thank you to everyone involved with putting on IndoPac 2026. Everyone from Threat Status and the Washington Times, all of our great panelists and speakers and partners, everyone at the Navy Memorial, and of course, a big thanks to all of you, our listeners. Please go ahead, hit that subscribe button, share with all your friends, and we'll be back next week on the Threat Status Podcast.